So, gotta do this. Alright, I don't usually have a problem with VisualPolitik, but there's some of this that I don't agree with because what I've seen around me and up and down the country is not being borne out by what this guy has been saying.
Okay, VisualEconomik fans, I have a question for you. Do you believe that access to university should be free for everyone?
Yes.
Well, I dare say most of you probably think so, that there are plenty of reasons why free access to higher education is more than desirable. For example, by not having to pay university fees, everyone could be trained and get a quality job. In other words, university would be a way to promote equal opportunities regardless of the income level of the students' families. Merit.
Just so I can preface here, he's going to come out with some details of why free education is bad for the poor and the less well off. And I'm going to challenge what he's saying. He's going to show graphs, and if you, I will put a link up for so you can watch the episode yourself. You can see the graphs. But yeah, I've got a problem with a number of these.
An effort over economic capacity. In short, making it possible for even the poorest person to attend.
It's almost like he's cherry picking it from a capitalist perspective. It's like he's not being biased. I don't know whether or not VisualPolitik I didn't think it was a capitalist program, but
University seems like a perfect.
This is VisualEconomik, not VisualPolitik. Sorry, but I didn't think it was actually capitalist, and I'm sorry, but the over privatization of our education, of a higher education system, hasn't had the good effect.
Way of reducing inequality and achieving a more equitable world. And you may be partly right. However, I am sorry to disappoint you, but things are not that easy. The particular issue is a bit more complicated than it may first seem to us at first glance. But of course, you want some proof of what I'm talking about, so take a look at this. This line represents the percentage of college access for young Americans. As you can see, the higher the income of the parents.
Right. It does that. Right. And again, I will put a link up, possibly there or and it, I'll put this video as a link at the end of this episode. Do watch it. The graph does that from poorest to wealthiest,
the greater the chances that their children will have access to higher education. Specifically, while 9 out of 10 children from better off families gain access to university, only 3 out of 10 children from poor families do so. In other words, if you are born into a wealthy family in the US, you have 3 times the chance of being a college graduate than if you are born into a low-income family. But so far, of course, this is nothing new. The United States is not exactly known for having free universities accessible to all, so it is logical that these lowest socioeconomic groups have fewer opportunities than the rest. Well, take a look at what happens when we draw a line on the same graph representing university access in France. Surprisingly, the French and American lines are almost identical. Students both rich and...
The American one, the French one dips under towards the poor. It's more biased towards them, whilst there is a similar line going on, what he's not saying is that there is actually a dip going on rather than a rise or staying. It actually does dip.
Poor American and French access university in very similar proportions. And now, I'm sure many of you are wondering, are universities in France also private, and do lower income families have to face unaffordable university fees that cause this inequality? Are France and America so similar? This is where the most curious aspect of all comes in. France is the opposite of the USA. France is one of the countries with the most subsidized universities in the world. However, that does not translate into the poor being better able to pursue higher education. It's as if having an almost free university doesn't make any difference. So now
No, because you don't just take... Right, this is one of those occasions where non-absolutism is an advantage, because you don't just go, right, free education and that's it, that solves education. No, because there are other aspects of education that also need to be addressed.
Question is, why does this happen? Why, despite the overwhelming difference in fees, do social inequalities remain virtually intact? Why does making university so cheap seem to serve absolutely no purpose, at least if we're talking about facilitating access? Well, the truth is that the answer may surprise you even more. What would you think if I told you that free, or nearly free, college actually increases inequality further? What if I told you that offering college at zero cost may be a policy that exacerbates inequality and punishes the less affluent class?
I don't understand that.
Today on VisualEconomik, we're going to explain this paradox. Listen up.
It is a paradox, and I don't understand it. I could just be being stupid, but
Just a moment ago, we said that both France and the United States, the children of the wealthiest families are 3 times more likely to go to college than the children of the poorest families. All this, despite the fact that in the United States, the cost of university is much higher than in France. And if you look at this information alone, we could deduce a key factor. Perhaps the price to pay for college is not what is causing these class differences.
no, because that's just one part. That's just one part of the education system.
But if the price of the enrollment fee is not the real cause of inequality, then how on earth can we explain such differences between the wealth?
No. The price is part of it. There is a difference between the graphs. Right, when you look, there might be a slim difference, but there is a difference, and its bias goes towards the poor a bit more than it does towards the rich.
Wealthiest and the least wealthy families? Well, the answer is in the children.
As I was saying, other parts. Right. Letter recognition proficiency by poverty threshold, and it's saying here basically that the middle class are better off with beginning word sounds and recognizing letters, and the near poor and the poor are worse off, right? Well, that's due to quality of education. This is what I mean. So you need, as far as I'm concerned, you do need free college education and university education. That's just one part of it. What you also need is to have a more robust education system for early years. Like, you can't just look at this with an absolute mindset.
In a study done in German schools, it was found that children from families with fewer resources were a clear academic disadvantage compared to children from average families. For example, while only 2 out of 10 children from the poorest families were able to recognize letters at the start of kindergarten, more than 7 out of 10 children from middle-class families were able to do so. And it does not matter whether the underlying reasons were cultural or material. The most interesting aspect of this data is that it shows that economic prosperity is correlated with children's academic development. And we're not only talking about children of kindergarten age, where apparently income differences should not mean too much. But why does all this matter if we are talking about university inequality? Basically, for one reason. As a student from a low-income family accumulates poor school performance, he or she is more and more likely to fail academically and drop out of the educational system. In short, if the children of the least prosperous families are less likely to go to university, this has to do above all with what we could call early school failure and not with not being able to pay tuition fees. And just like that, whether the institutions...
Right, see, I'm sorry, but there is a disparity when it comes to tuition fees. They're still there. It's just not the only factor. He's making it absolutes. He's one or the other here, and I'm sorry, but that isn't the case.
Are more or less costly, it is not very relevant for curbing the problem. But take note, because there is still more. A study done in France found that 9 out of 10 students received financial aid from their parents. So far, no surprises there. However, the important point is that while the poorest received almost $3,000 a year from their parents, the children of the wealthiest received up to €10,000 a year. And as you can imagine, for many young people who have to move to other cities to study, this makes a very significant difference. Because in many cases, the cost of going to colleges goes far beyond the tuition.
Right. So that's why you bring in a law. This is why the French have missed a trick. You bring in a law that makes it so you can't disadvantage, so that you can't just advantage your child because you've got more money. Make this a societal thing rather than keeping it all about fucking money.
We're talking about rent, transport, food, and everything necessary to attend college, mostly alcohol. Needless to say, this is an undertaking that, for many families with few resources, is too burdensome, regardless of whether or not tuition is free. And that is whether other options such as scholarships or equality financing arise. But we'll talk about that later. The fact is that at the beginning of this video, we did not say at any time that free tuition is useless. We said that it can also be detrimental to students from poorer families. The question then is, how can free tuition hurt those who have the least? Check this out.
The inverted Robin Hood.
Think about it for a moment. A free university system means that it is free for everyone, for the rich, the middle classes, and for the poor. However,
right, again, this is why you have regulations. This is why there should be rules set in place. You don't just make something free without thinking of any of the consequences. It's ridiculous. This is why the French, whilst there is a bias more towards the poor, the graph did look a little bit, similar to the American line. But there was still that disparity.
free has a catch. After all, public spending is financed by taxes that we all pay. So the question is, if the wealthy students are 3 times more likely to go to college than the poor, and if the state pays for all tuition with everyone's taxes, the state will pay for all of the tuition. Isn't that tantamount to allocating taxes to pay mostly for the tuition fees of students?
Yes, if you took a one-size-fits-all approach. Just because you make it free doesn't mean it has to be one-size-fits-all. Rules and regulations. Why didn't you put that into place? Legal regulations, which means you can't oversupply your child with stuff when it would be detrimental to other people in their class, say. Again, you take this to a societal level rather than keeping it at a fucking selfish monetary level.
From wealthy families? Well, everything indicates that the answer here is yes. In France, the average university grant received by the poorest 30% of families is around €8,000 per year, while the average grant received by the wealthiest 10% of families is about 18,000.
Right. Again, this is where we need rules and regulations, right? And this is a failing of the government, not of the fact of it being a free education. The French government fucked up here by purposely giving more money to wealthy people. Or am I completely missing something here?
Euros per year, more than twice as much. This is what is known as a regressive policy, or an inverted Robin Hood. That is, using taxes to help the richest and not the poorest. Something that was quite ironic, considering that taxes are always sold as a method of helping the most disadvantaged.
Yes, but if you've got a government that will actually tax properly, then I don't see the problem here.
And pay attention, because it doesn't end there. Another factor that makes this reverse Robin Hood phenomenon even worse is that the rich receive higher university grants and therefore more opportunities to access better paying.
Right, so what you do is not give the rich larger grants. It's quite like... That's just one of the ways to deal with that problem. My God! There's no bias. There's no non-biasness here. Yes, I am a socialist. But what he's doing here is putting out the capitalist argument. He's not making it a non-biased argument here. He's just putting the capitalist argument. I'm sorry, but no.
Jobs and inequality between classes grows over time. By disproportionately paying for university for the richest, we make them even richer.
Right, so don't disproportionately pay the rich. That's a policy decision by government. That doesn't mean that free education doesn't work.
In the future. This is what is known as dynamic inequality. And to give you an illustrative
This
figure,
is what I call confirmation bias, mate.
In the United States, a college graduate can earn up to $2,000 per month more on average than someone with only a high school.
Again, this is policy decisions by governments. deciding to give more to the rich than they do to the poor. It's a policy decision. That's why if you add something nice in like free education, it doesn't have the impact it should. Because on other levels, you're not... well, when you do put it free education, you then fucking... It's like... my best comparison here is what the UK government did with its fucking stupid energy price freeze, which wasn't a guarantee, right? And it's the fact that when he said that, when Rishi Sunak said, "Oh, I'm bringing this windfall tax in," right? Sorry, it's not about the guarantee. It was the windfall tax, right? Rishi Sunak's windfall tax. Oh, I'll bring this. We will make the rich people pay more taxes. The big oil companies pay more taxes. What he didn't tell everyone and didn't make obvious to everyone was that there were loopholes for Shell and other petrol companies to not pay the tax if they were investing in more gas and oil. Just like, it's stupid. It's purposely looking at it from a capitalist view.
Diploma. So, do the math. Be that as it may.
I have done the maths. Well, you sound Scottish. But you're British. Maths. Mathematics.
In the potential problems of the free college model, we cannot leave here without providing solutions. So the question is, what on earth can we do to enable the most disadvantaged to go to college without making it free? Is there a realistic alternative to...
Why do we have to not make it free? Why? Because by your evidence it shows, oh yeah, but look, it does disadvantage it. Look, it does disadvantage it. Again, I will put the link up to this video so you can see it fucking self. But it's confirmation bias. Because what he's not pointing out here is that it's a government policy decision to give more money to the rich than they do to the poor. More resources to the rich than they do to the poor. So it's nothing to do with the free education system. The problem isn't the free education system. Oh!
Highly subsidized systems. Well, the truth is, yes. And for that, get ready, because we have to go to England.
Oh.
Nothing.
If he's going to try and use Britain, England, as a bastion for how we should do education, you really need to take a closer look.
Is free.
A realistic look, not just from a captain's point of view.
Until just 2 decades ago, university in England was completely free. For much of the 20th century, the British government took care of university costs so that English students did not have to pay a single pound out of pocket for their higher education. However, in 1998, things changed. The government, in its infinite wisdom, decided it no longer felt like spending all the money it was spending on English universities and made them start charging university tuition fees of up to £1,000 a year. It's around $1,200 US. Although it must be noted that the tuition fees were lower if the student came from a family with fewer resources. In this way, the government was able to save a few bucks and the students had to bear a small part of the cost of their studies. Nothing too serious. In any case, this small change in 1998 was not so important because of its magnitude.
And yes, that is under the New Labour. That was under New Labour. That's one policy area I'm not a fan of.
The prelude to the most interesting thing that we're going to tell you about in this video.
It's one thing I did that when I found out, I was like,
a few years later, in 2006 and 2012, the British government...
Our education system is in a shocking state, and not just because of the pandemic. And this guy's trying to...
in its infinite wisdom, made 2 other changes to the British university system, both with the aim of further privatising educational funding. And these changes, my friends, were very considerable. Thereafter, the government allowed universities to charge tuition fees of up to £9,000 per year, thereby saddling students with a very significant part of the cost of university, while the state cut its public spending on tuition by almost 2/3 compared to the 1990s.
Doing it with a nice big grin on his face. This guy sounds like the guy who would like to have a smaller state. This guy sounds like a capitalist. I've never thought of VisualPolitik or VisualEconomik as a capitalist channel before, but that's definitely the way it's seeming to me, because the way he said that was a nice big grin on his face, as if having a smaller state was a good thing.
In addition,
He's going to pull this off as a good thing as well, saying that public expenditure in Britain from 95 to 2011 went down. Well, that's not good.
the government eliminated the possibility for lower income families to pay reduced tuition. So everyone ended up paying the same price regardless of their wealth.
I'm sorry, no. That was a bad thing.
So the question
Equity,
is,
not
what
just
were the
equality.
consequences of these changes? Was it a hecatomb for poor families? Well, after basically privatizing tuition fees, there was indeed a group of the population that was the most disadvantaged. Surprisingly, the disadvantaged group was not the poorest, but rather the wealthiest. That's right. After the 2006 reforms, students from families with greater purchasing power reduced their university participation by 1.6 percentage points. And guess what happened to the rest of the students? Well, yes, exactly the opposite.
That's massive boost. That's a massive
The English
drop.
government, through the privatisation of tuition fees, managed to reduce university spending by 2/3 without harming the...
I wonder if there was any other factors going on at the time which made them go, which made them drop out a bit. Just saying. He hasn't even bothered to say that there wasn't any other factors. That's what I'm saying. Like, if he pointed out that there were no other factors that played a part in them not wanting to go to university so much by 1.2%, then it wouldn't be as big a problem for this video wouldn't be as big a problem. But it's the fact that he's not even pointing that out. He's just cherry picking stuff here.
the middle and lower classes. And come to think of it, by reducing the huge expenditure that was going to the universities, the government now has more resources to devote to strengthening the most basic levels of education and ensuring fewer disadvantaged young people leave the education system prematurely. With this reform, the reverse Robin Hood was reduced to ashes. Wealthy students now had to pay their college tuition. Although, on second thought, now the middle and lower classes also have to pay more tuition. How is it possible that this did not affect them? There must be something else, don't you think?
No, it
Well,
has
indeed,
affected.
something else.
No, see, I'm sorry, but again, you say it hasn't affected us, but there are students across the country that are crippled under debt. There are students killing themselves across the country. More often, the ones who are less well off that are actually committing suicide because they are getting to the point where they can't pay their tuition fees. So fuck off, mate.
Is what is known as student loans.
And I know this because I known a couple of them that killed themselves.
Along with the 2006 and 2012 reforms, the British government launched a public loan programme that was available to everyone. The government lent you money to study, and once you finished your degree, you had to pay it back. This may seem simple and a bit lazy, but wait a minute, because the good thing about these credits is that they have a condition that made them very special. If a student did not manage to find a good job after finishing college, he or she did not have to pay back a single penny to the state. And so, thanks to this system, access to university for disadvantaged people remained very straightforward and practically risk-free. If a student earned...
No, it didn't. I'm sorry. Because I've wanted to do it, go into university for quite a while, but it's the costs that kept me out of it. So, sorry, but no.
No more than £21,000 a year at the end of his or her studies, he or she did not have to pay anything back. That is precisely why the poor were not harmed by this reform. However, we mentioned a while ago that apart from tuition, there are other expenses that must be taken into account. For example, rent, food, and transport for students who are forced to move from one city to another in order to study. And of course, there's also alcohol. Did the English reform take these factors into account to help disadvantaged families? Yes. In addition to the line of student loans, the British government also approved scholarships of up to £3,700 per year for students with limited resources. This, by the way...
Right. Yeah, but so many of us are still waiting on decisions. And even then, that's too much.
It's reflected in the fact that students from less affluent families were now able to attend universities further away from their homes than before. All in all, that doesn't sound too bad, does it? And in many occasions, the key is not to spend more, but above all, to spend more wisely.
I'm sorry. Yes. But, again, it's like you're purely looking at this from a capitalist perspective. And I'm sorry, but the education in this country is not as high standard as it used to be because of the amount of times I'm having to correct people who are supposedly at university. Obviously, the education system has crumpled a little bit in how robust the quality of the education actually is. The amount of times I've had to prove people wrong. Yes, I've been proven wrong myself. But, again, I might be missing something here, but not all of this is ringing true for me. There's some of it is like, yeah, okay, fair enough. But there's a lot of this in here that seems like capitalist confirmation bias. I haven't been able to access university. You've got the open university thing. I'm a more tactile person. I want to do university. But again, there are barriers. And people are like, get a job. Well, I'm disabled. So just getting a job, not easy. There are ifs and buts around, but I want a good quality, a damn good quality education if I'm going to university. I don't just want an average education. Free university and free college can work, could work, and does have a better effect than complete and utter privatization than it did with he compared the France to the US. And yes, it was still a line, but he explained they paid more more subsidies for the wealthier people. That's the problem. But the line is still different. There is more of a bias towards the poor with the free education system. The only reason why it's not done what it's supposed to have done, I can see, is them deciding they still want to do the capitalist thing and give more to the rich people. It's like, am I the only one who sees that?
Be that as it may, visual economic fans, from this video we can draw at least 3 conclusions. 1. Free college tends to allocate mostly public money to people who don't need it, so it's a regressive policy. 2.
Right. That's an absolute, right? And it's bullshit. So I challenge that right there. The simple fact is that he's taking an example, a poor example of how to utilize free university. So, no, I don't accept that. I accept that you know what he's saying here. If take it at face value, yeah. But when you dig down deeper, as he did, he literally said they pay more subsidies to the rich than the poor, and that is a political decision. That is a capitalist decision. Give more to the rich. This sounds more like a Tory decision. Give more to the rich than you do to the poor. So, fuck off with that first point.
2. The main reason why young people of limited means do not access university is early dropout, not so much the cost of university tuition. And 3.
Yes, but again, you just got to add that bit, not free tuition. I'm sorry, but he's treating it like they're absolutes, and he's wrong.
There are more efficient methods to guarantee university access to all without public waste, such as student loans or scholarships for students with few resources. But now that we're...
scholarships for student resources is waste. You're a Tory. Fuck you. That's it. This has been my answer back to VisualEconomik being capitalist bastards. And you can copyright me if you want, guys. I don't give a fuck. But like, I live in this situation. I've been wanting to get into higher education because I've got the brain for it, but the funding means that it's about the funding is the barrier. Like, there's no unbiasedness here. It's not. I didn't know this was supposed to be a capitalist channel. I didn't know that. And if it isn't supposed to be, VisualEconomik, let me know and clean up your act, because this was not unbiased. This was capitalist propaganda and capitalist confirmation bias. Cherry picking facts, mate. If you're going to dig deep, actually dig deep. Do a 20, 30 minute long video instead of an 11.5 minute long video where you just cherry pick the bits you like. So yeah, this has been my call out video for VisualEconomik. You lying bastards. Well, maybe not lying, but seriously misguided. This has been Shadow Eater. This has been my dark specky, my dark wisdom. Blessed Thursday, everyone.